I'm not sure if you've noticed it too, but it seems to me like people have stopped talking about the concepts of liberal versus conservative or socialism versus capitalism. And we've kind of moved on to a different conversation, which I find interesting. And I wanted to talk about, what is going to be the new ideology or the new way of thinking, um, in the current reality, and as we move forward into the new world. Um, Before it was always this conversation, this idea that there were these two competing ideologies, whereas capitalism and conservatism was basically, government should step out of the way and let business sort of run free, and God and church and guns, and that's kind of the extent of it. And I think that doesn't always resonate with people because it doesn't feel inclusive enough. It doesn't feel like it accepts everything about the reality of who we are. They talk about, conservative leaders talk a lot about freedom and things like this, but in reality, what it always felt more like is that we were taught, how to behave, what to think, how to act, how to fit into this sort of patriotic society and it doesn't always resonate with people. So on the flip side, we had, and I'm talking as an American primarily, we have the idea of liberalism, the Democrats, socialism in Europe and other parts of the world, and the idea being, which sounds awfully nice, that the government takes care of people, those who can't always take care of themselves. Healthcare is provided for, and education through university, and basically this idea of transferring wealth from the wealthy to those in need. And that sounds like a nice idea. The reality has always been, as we see now playing out in the U.S. Or everywhere, is that you have this ridiculous elite, this ruling cabal that is basically using the ideology of socialism to get us to buy into this. But in reality, what they're doing is they're taking care of their elite friends. The money's being funneled up directly from the government and also just through their businesses and so forth. It's not really about what they say it's about. If you look at the relief bills and things like this, how much goes to helping people versus how much goes to their interests. So what we see now is this whole thing collapsing. We see that the old-fashioned conservatism didn't really. What ended up happening was that it was just corporate rule. It was ruled by very large corporations and their power. It never really was about the individual's freedom, and it always, it never really meant less government. We always had the same regulations anyway, and it didn't really matter how conservative or liberal the ruling party ever was. Nothing really ever changed, and that's because the system has been corrupt for a very long time, and very corrupt. So what we see happening now is the idea that we can end corruption, right? And you look at kind of, there's two camps now. It's not about liberal or conservative. What it is people that are believing in the mainstream narrative. They're believing in the media, the healthcare establishment, and the politicians, and they're taking literally what they're being spoon-fed as being true. And then you have the other side, which we believe that those entities no longer have any legitimacy or authority because they're no longer based on reality or truth. 95% of it is not real information. It's not even true. There's a lot of question around whether what COVID-19 actually is. Is it just a common strain of the flu? A lot of people think that it is, and this is entirely made up, this whole pandemic, for the purpose of, well, for some other purposes, controlling us, getting us to submit to a sort of authoritarianism. And as we're emerging from this, and it has to come to an end, we're not going to live under lockdown and wearing masks indefinitely. That a lot of the ruling people might have thought we were going to, but it's not going to happen. And we're starting to emerge from this dark winter we've been through for the past year. And you just feel it changing. You feel people waking up. You feel that the big lies just cannot go on indefinitely. They are being exposed. And a lot of us, there's a lot of evidence, like overwhelming evidence for those who are not just watching the mainstream media, who are paying attention to Telegram and other sources. And there's a lot of evidence that how things appear is not really how things are, that the good guys, the white hats, are actually kind of rooting out all these bad players and arresting them, putting in new people, changing these problems, draining the swamp. It's actually happening. So what's the new ideology if we're going to look to a future? And I'm not going to get stuck here in this video arguing about whether or not that's happening, because obviously you're sitting there thinking, well, is it true? What's happening in the world? And everyone is talking about what's happening in the world, or what's going to happen. And nobody knows what's going to happen for sure. But I think what is more interesting than waiting for something to happen externally is, how do we live? How do we think? How do we thrive as individuals? How do our families thrive? What do we teach our children? What do we talk to our family and friends about? What are our values? What do we believe is true? What is the new paradigm? And I think we can all agree that the old paradigms of liberal versus conservative just kind of faded away at some point in the past year. And liberal became this thing where we're talking about Black Lives Matter and transsexualism and all this stuff, and that's kind of where it just gets stuck. And conservatives are really more about what is even being called conspiracy theorists, because we just don't even believe anything happening officially anymore, because it's absurd. And there's a reason for that, and the reason for that is to wake people up, because we're going to a new era. That's what really is happening. We're going to a new era. Neither of these forces at play right now are going to be are going to continue very much longer, a few days, a few weeks, perhaps. And then we're in this new era. And this process is what's known as the Great Awakening. I used to call it the consciousness revolution. It means the same thing. It means an awakening from the old duality, the good, bad, liberal, conservative, and this ongoing argument that really was never designed to come to an end, never really designed to solve much of anything, because it was always competing. But now what's emerging is going to be a singular thought system. And what is it? I want to talk about what that is. What is it going to mean to be on the side of truth and justice and morality, and to thrive and to be wealthy and have an abundant life and be happy and basically get things right? Which side is that now? It's not, so what it is how do we take care of people? In other words, to address the socialist moral calling, to make sure that everyone has equal opportunity and fairness in society. And you'll be surprised to find out that conservatives share that opinion as well. I was surprised as I switched over from being a lifelong liberal to a conservative in the past year. I found out that everyone wants this, and I'll talk about what we mean by that and how that looks different perhaps. But how do we address that? How do we allow for freedom, for the Constitution in various countries to govern us? Freedom to even own weapons, and freedom of speech, and freedom to travel and to do what we choose, as long as we don't harm someone else. And how do we rein in the corporate power and these corrupt powers from exploiting and enslaving us? So what philosophy is that? And neither conservatism nor liberalism, I believe, has a claim on the solution to the problem, to this horrific kind of grinding of the gears, coming to a point where we can no longer go forward, which has been the past year, but we are going to go forward. And the new way of thinking, the Great Awakening, it is multifaceted, but I'll go through some of the main concepts to sort of get used to. The first is withdrawal of authority from external, so from institutions. People are learning, and the purpose of this slow, painful process and all the fiction in the world right now, everywhere, everyone being tricked, is to humble us to the idea that our specific government, our specific parties, the healthcare system, the corporations we trusted, maybe, the pharmaceutical industry, right? Our churches, that we trusted, that we cannot trust these institutions. Now, some more or less than others, but the point is a basic fundamental withdrawal of unconditional trust and authority in external institutions, which means, where is it? Well, it goes within. It comes from within. Your authority, my authority, the true authority is within us, our free will to make the right decisions and to live properly and to do the right things. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a good? Well, another part of this is to be a good person, to be nice. This is a new thing in the world, I know, because we're taught the whole time, our whole lives, basically, that good guys never win, but that hasn't been true. And I can say that as somebody who I see myself as wanting to be a good guy, and I've done just fine, and I do just fine without any problems. So what does it mean to be a good guy, good gal, right? It means to be nice to people. To care about people, and when you're going to work, or you're starting a business or doing something, it means giving. It means creating value, which means, what do you need? How can I solve that? How can I give you what you need? Right? Now, can you start to see how that value system of, hey, I want to be honest with you, I want to serve you, I want to create value for you, I want you to do well. It's nice. It's a very nice way of being. It's also the way you make a lot of money and have a lot of new customers, and the way you get a job very easily and make friends. So you see the abundance that would come from such an attitude. I mean, isn't that what someone is paying for you to create value, to solve their problems, to give them what they're buying from you when they give you money? So it's a shift away from maybe this mentality that a lot of liberals have, like, kind of, I deserve this minimum wage, give it to me. I don't feel like working that hard. I don't feel like doing that. And there's a total detachment in that old way of thinking, or current way of thinking, unfortunately, where you don't feel the need to have to do anything for anyone. It's all about you. It's me, me, me. And that's going to, you can continue with that, but you're not going to be very successful in this new world. And that brings up the topic of, what do you do with these people that are unwilling to make that transition to be more self-sufficient? Now, self-sufficient doesn't mean it's all about you, me, me, me. It means I, by myself, give myself authority to what? To start my own business, to seek the career, the profession that I find that draws me in, that inspires me, and then to do it in a way that I'm giving the most value possible at all times. And then, of course, charging a fair price to make money, which you deserve for doing all that, right? But there's always going to be some people that just want a handout. And I think you're going to find that the good guys who are in charge, well, one of the reasons why they are good guys is they're going to make sure you're okay. There is enough wealth in the world, once you remove all the bad players that have been hoarding the 99% of the wealth, or whatever it may be, in the world, and you divide that evenly, and you stop the corrupt central banking system, which is happening right now, and you go back to a gold standard with limited money supply that doesn't just keep growing and taking wealth away from you. When these things start happening, there's going to be enough to go around so that everyone has food and shelter. So you're going to find out that the same people you thought, if you're a liberal, you thought that conservatives were selfish. You're going to find out that's not true. Charity is kind of a core value, and in a world where where everybody has enough abundance and you can be charitable. We're going to be charitable. We're going to make sure everyone is taken care of, and that everyone does have equal opportunity. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have this rigid educational system that we have right now, which is falling apart also, right? So the idea that education means spending so much money with all these resources and buildings and teachers and class sizes and this, and then doing this rigid curriculum, for 20 years, we're going to move beyond that. We already are moving beyond that. There's going to be a lot more freedom in education, so that our children are driven kind of by their inspiration and by their unique abilities and their interests, and parents are going to have a way of more freedom to guide that and help these children make decisions. And we're going to then look for resources from the institutions, from the companies, from whoever it may be, through our free will. We're going to say, well, I can't teach my kid everything. I need you to help. We're going to buy something here, or we're going to get this provided for us here. But it's not going to be forced upon our children. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It should be free access, and to education. But the fact of the matter is, there is no one right education, and degrees don't always lead to a person having value in society or doing what they're supposed to be doing. So our careers, our professions, our businesses, it's going to be more of a evolving sort of stop and go sort of custom thing that we're responsible for under our own authority as people. And it's okay if our children have different experiences. They're going to. We're brought into different worlds, different kinds of families with different kinds of values. And it's natural that a family should have the ability to shape their reality in the way that fits them, not in the way that the state bureaucrats decided 30 years ago. It's just too rigid and too brittle, and it's broken, and it has broken. So education there. Now, healthcare, same sort of thing, right? We're going to move away from this idea that health comes from these overly educated, doctors and scientists that are detached from life and from the experience that most of us have in terms of how we experience life and health, and this mechanized version of seeing health and treating the body as though it's a motor in a car. We're going to acknowledge the reality that the natural state of existence for any life form, including human beings, is perfect health. Our bodies work perfectly when we don't damage our bodies through stress, through fear, through terrible diets, through terrible habits, through lack of exercise, through exhausting ourselves 9 to 5 at work every single day, and school likewise. So as we have a better lifestyle, we're going to understand food better with better information, and we're not going to need all this healthcare. It'll still be there to some extent, but it's, you should never have to go to the doctor. You should never have to take a prescription pill. You should be healthy. If not, something is wrong somewhere else in your life. It's more of a holistic approach. So access to healthcare, okay, in an emergency, of course, everyone should have a surgery, and you shouldn't go broke doing that. But healthcare is going to become much less important as a thing we worry about, I think, because we're going to be healthy. And if you look at, some of the topics I covered, religion, we're seeing the awakening means an awakening to God. And there's going to be an understanding that everyone's going to have their own understanding of God through different words and concepts. And it's not going to be this, thing where the Christians dominate, or one religion dominates in a country. There's got to be some acceptance on everyone's part, but there's going to be a much more greater acceptance in this invisible force, the Tao Te Ching, the creative force, the force of life itself, the energy, the thought system of love. These are truths, and we're all going to come to embrace that truth. Not all, but more people. The new paradigm, the new ideology is centered around is humbling yourself from your own ego to embracing something such as you could call God, you could call unconditional love, you could call consciousness, right? So these words aren't going to be so important. What's important is that our lives are rooted in this foundation of higher truth. And truth, so higher truth, but the core values now in this new reality, I believe, are love, which is what I said before about being a good person and being giving and accepting of people and forgiving and things like this. So learn about what love really is, what unconditional love, what God's love is, and truth. Wanting truth always, telling the truth always, and this requires openness, acceptance, forgiveness, non-judgment, and it's the way not just to do your marriage and relationships, like your close relationships, but also the way to do all your relationships at work. If you have a business, with my customers, I live in Slovakia for 15 years as an American, and I've been able to thrive doing business. I have a lead generation appointment setting company. I work with software companies, and I have no problem bringing in new customers from around the world, from the US and the UK, wherever, because I talk to my customers in a way that I'm solving their problems. I'm not pitching something to them. I get on the call and I talk about their world and what's going on and what I can do to help them succeed. So that's a loving approach. It's an honest and open approach. I tell them what I can and can't do, and I deliver what I know I can deliver. And so that approach to life, where you're honest with people, you're honest with your lovers, you're honest with your children, about how the world is, about the future, what to expect if they choose this path or that, so forth. And so that's the core foundation, and it's this higher truth. It's just wanting truth, it's accepting truth. And what we're talking about is escaping the ego. So I've talked a lot about ego. A lot of people talk about ego. Eckhart Tolle, Course in Miracles, a lot about ego. It's a shift away from the ego to this other state of being. And that's the new paradigm. And there's a lot more to it. I can go into a lot of depth in all these areas. But I think we're going to see a situation where we're not going to tolerate ugly entertainment. We're not going to want trashy music videos that make us feel sick to our stomach. The singers look like they're about to throw up at any point, like their faces like ready to vomit on you. How they look, because they're so into their egos. It's so cool. That whole attitude is going to fade away. And what we're going to want is beauty. We're going to want something inspiring and beautiful, not like cheesy beautiful, but like more beautiful, positive vibes and vibrations. And that's going to be, films and all the content. We're going to want honesty in the news, or we're going to shut it off. And it's going to be there because the good guys are going to be in charge. There's not going to be so much opportunity to get rich exploiting people, because the good guys are going to be in charge. So companies will have to create value and serve us. So the authority now moves to every one of us, and not everyone is going to make that shift. When you look at, for example, what happened in Eastern Europe, where I live, and I first came to Slovakia in 1993 to visit, which is right at the end of communism, in the beginning of after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and there was all this talk with the people I was meeting, the family members and so forth, that oh my gosh, we have to change everything. The school's changing, the way of thinking. What is this? It's all about money. It's all about this. And some people made it. Some people started a business right away, and they embraced the change, and they learned what it was all about, and they've thrived, for the most part. And others just wanted to cling to, their values from the past, and they just didn't really adjust, and their abundance disappeared slowly over the years, and they just became more and more miserable. You have to embrace this change. And it's not really, we're stuck now predicting what's going to happen. But I'm saying, that's not where to be stuck, because what I'm talking about works no matter what happens, right? Even if I'm wrong that the good guys are winning, and that the horrible evil in the world, the child trafficking, and the corruption and endless lies we see everywhere, even if that continues to some degree or to the same degree, even if full-on communism and totalitarianism does take hold, which is not going to, don't worry. Even so, these values will win because this is the true thought system, the true ideology. There is no opposite to it. You can't say, "Oh, be a good guy, good gal." No, I want to be bad. No one's going to argue that. There's no opposite to this. I don't want love. I don't want to be loving. You can be cute and ignore these kinds of teachings or these kinds of ideas, but at the end of the day, it's to your own detriment, right? So that's where we're at. And this is a transition everyone's going to have to make, or else they're going to have to suffer a lot and suffer, face a crisis, even bigger crisis, until this lesson is learned. And the sooner it's learned, then everything starts to work. And you don't have to wait to know for sure who's president or anything. I made this transition slowly between the past 15 years to the past 5 years, in that transition where it was almost complete by 5 years ago. And even during these crazy times, I'm so overwhelmed with joy and hope and positive energy. Even of course, we've all had struggles in the past year and low points, but when you make this transition, you just realize it's the absolute truth. There's no more confusion about anything. Got a challenge, got a problem? The loving response. What to do? Should I tell? Yes, tell. What should I do if this person did this? Find out the full reality, embrace the whole truth about it, right? If you're not forgiving someone, you're holding this rigid idea that they're guilty from the past. Even your parents might have done something to you or abandoned you or something. Find out the whole truth about it. That those who cheated on you, find out the whole truth about what was going on inside them and in their lives and in their minds, and try to see past it, because we're all trying to get to this place. We're all trying to get to this good place, and it's the new reality, the new paradigm, and that's why I'm so excited. I hope this was interesting. I have a lot more stuff out there. If you go to abscondo.com, I write almost every day on these topics. I wrote 2 books about this stuff. I have a bunch of music out there, and I'm not doing this for any personal gain. I'm just trying to share the stuff that I learn as I go on through life. So thank you if you made it all the way to almost a half hour. That's wonderful. Get in contact or check out my next video. I'll try to do some of these. I do a podcast also, which is just the audio. So hopefully this was helpful and enjoyable. Take care.